Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ODPP Café. It's Friday. We have this show every day at 8 a.m. on Facebook Live. Remember, we are also on Twitter and on YouTube. Today, we are live on YouTube. You can also watch us from there. Join us on Facebook, on Twitter, and all the social media platforms. You can ask us questions concerning today's topic. There are experts on standby waiting to respond to any queries you may have. I want to just go through this week at ODPP, what has been happening at the ODPP. And the first one is about the Kahawa law courts. This week, the DPP Nurdin Haji and the IG Mutiambai went to Kahawa law courts to assess the functionality and security of the courts. This court is envisaged to become a center of prosecuting transnational and organized crimes regionally and internationally. Also, at the ODPP, yesterday, the staff and dependents of the ODPP staff received their initial COVID-19 vaccine. And of course, the second dosage or the second vaccine will be given on the 8th of June. The next case, in a case of cybercrime, I know you've seen this. Adrian Kiama was released on a 500K cash bail pending a police probe. He's accused of being the one behind the public notice using the images of the president and the deputy president, warning IMF not to give Kenya loans. I know you've seen this trending, and I bet you've been part of the conversation. So the person who made the posters that were out there giving a public notice on IMF, telling them not to give us a loan, was found to be Eddie Kiama, and he was charged with a cybercrime. They're still investigating, and is out on a 500K cash bail. In Kisumu, there was a bizarre incident in Nyalenda. A 19-year-old man, I know because remember we defined who a child is. So this guy is 19. He was accused of decapitating his grandmother. That means he cut off the grandmother's head. Very bizarre. He was detained for 7 days pending a completion of the investigations. And then also the court ordered for a mental assessment because this is quite bizarre. In another case, in a party gone wrong in Kileleshwa, a university student was charged with assault. Brian Morioki was charged with hitting Mark Ngari with a bottle after a disagreement. So Mark is in ICU, but Brian was put out on bail. Investigations are still ongoing. The last case I'll look at just this week, like I said, it's at the ODPP, what has been happening. Lamu MCA was sentenced to jail for attempting to help 3 convicts escape prison. The jail term and the bail terms were very confusing to most of us, but then we'll have one of our guests explain exactly what this means. You know, we don't understand a lot of these things sometimes when you see them being reported. And remember, this show is about informing and educating you. I'm also being educated. You're on this journey together. And like I keep saying, knowledge is power. So just let's get onto this journey of empowerment so that we know how the law works, and especially the criminal justice system. So remember, this show is brought to you by the ODPP, and the ODPP or the DPP is the Minister for Justice. And what they do here is for public interest. So a lot of these things we'll be learning are what pertains to the public and how it applies to our daily lives. So the topic today has been on discussion on social media most of this week. In as much as the week has been short, we have attempted to introduce you to a topic or a concept called diversion. I know you've seen this discussion on Twitter and on Facebook. So today, like we normally do, is we have guests in our studio today, and they are meant to introduce us and help us understand what this thing means. So criminal practice in Kenya has always been long focused on retributive justice, meaning it has always been about punishing offenders. But then with concepts like diversion, we are talking about other ways of helping these offenders and just bringing them back into the society. So I mean, modern criminal justice system is about restoration, and that's where we are as a country, and that's where we're discussing diversion today. So I'm going to introduce our guests. They are the experts. They're the teachers of the law. I mean, we do a lot of, like you say, it's like a classroom. So karibuni darasani, tuko na guest wawili. One of them is Eddie and Linda, but because ladies first, I'm going to allow Linda to introduce herself. Linda, please introduce yourself and tell us what you do at the ODPP.
Thank you, Anita, for having me here. My name is Linda Dambiri. I am a Senior Prosecution Counsel. I work under the Children Division, which is under the larger Conventional and Related Crimes Department. I prosecute at the Children's Court at Milimani, and it is a pleasure. I was part of the team that came up with the diversion policy and the guidelines. Thank you for having me.
How long have you been at the ODPP, you said?
I've been at the ODPP since 2014.
Wow.
Yes.
Wewe ni ule.
Mimi ni ule.
Sawa, karibu sana.
Thank
Eddie,
you.
karibu.
Thank you very much. At some point in time, we'll need to revise that issue of ladies first. But we appreciate our ladies. The name is Eddie Kadebe. I am a Senior Principal Prosecution Counsel. Currently based in Lamu as the head of ODPP prosecutions in Lamu County. I've done a bit for this office as well since I joined in 2012. But relative to the topic today, I was with Linda when we conceived and walked through the process of coming up with a diversion policy and guidelines for this office. A lot of what goes into the thinking into diversion is things that both Linda and myself have handled as prosecutors in our journey through the ODPP. So we hope we shall be of benefit to the viewers and to anyone who is listening or watching us this morning.
So today you're teachers of the law. You break it down for us.
Yes.
So Eddie, start with that first of all. There's this case in Lamu that has gotten us all confused. What happened? How long has this guy been jailed for? Or what is the sentence? We don't understand it.
There's a lot that happens in Lamu, but I'll take the assumption that when you speak about this case in Lamu, you're talking about the MCA who was found guilty.
Yeah.
Well, simply put, he was convicted on 6 counts and sentenced on the same as well. So for count 1, 2, and 3, where he had attempted to aid prisoners escape, he was sentenced to 4 years in jail on each count because the section of the law under which he was charged didn't provide for an option of a fine. So we could only have a custodial sentence for that and a maximum of 10 years. So for each one of those 3, he was sentenced to 4 years. But then those 4 years run consecutively. Run concurrently. That means they go at the same time. It's not one after the other. So for counts 1, 2, and 3 being concurrent, it means that he can only serve a maximum of 4 years for those 3 counts.
Okay.
Then he was equally found guilty and sentenced for counts 4 and 5, which related to him forming a riot and causing fracas within the court premises.
Okay.
For each of those 2, he was found guilty and sentenced to pay a fine of 400,000 shillings for each count.
Okay.
If he's unable to pay the fine, then for each of those 2 counts again, he goes to prison for 4 years. Again, that cluster of count 4 and 5 moves together so that cumulatively he will only serve 4 years in case he's not able to pay the fine.
Okay.
If he pays the fine of 800,000 shillings, then he will have served sentence for counts 4 and 5. For count 6, he was sentenced to 18 months in prison. Before I go to count 6, if he's not able to pay the fine for counts 4 and 5, and then he has therefore to go to jail, the 4 years for which he needs to go to jail for in relation to count 4 and 5 will be consecutive to the 4 years he would have served for counts 1, 2, and 3. So that at this point, he serves 4 years for counts 1, 2, and 3. If he doesn't pay the fine, he serves another 4 years for count 5 and 6. For count 4 and 5. For count 6, he was sentenced to 18 months in prison. This again is consecutive, either to count 1 or count 2 if he serves time in jail.
Yeah.
So that on face value, assuming he pays the fine, he will do a total of 5.5 years.
Okay. He has to.
Yes. If he does not pay the fine, add 4 years to the 5.5, it becomes 9.5. Yes.
Okay. It was quite confusing, as you can imagine.
I'm sorry
so
for
just
that.
trying to understand what happened there. Anyway, so we get right into our discussion. And Linda, just give us a brief overview of what diversion is. What is diversion?
Okay. Simply put, diversion is an alternative to prosecution. This is a means of resolving criminal cases without going to the full judicial proceedings. So here what we're saying is that we will not be going to court for the criminal procedure to commence and end, but we will be resolving these cases out of court. And It's not a term that we have formulated as ODPP. It is an international best practice. When you look at international conventions and even our neighbors, what our neighbors are doing, we have, let's say, South Africa. I deal with children, so they do have the Child Justice Act, which really talks about diversion for children. So it is not a new concept that Kenya we're coming up with. It is a concept that has been an international best practice. We actually have seen the gains of what diversion, or we researched and we saw the gains of diversion in other jurisdictions, and we said, why not also apply? Because as ODPP, we are doing the retooling and the relearning of our processes. So we thought, why not maybe now introduce diversion into the criminal, our procedures. And ultimately, this is a concept that, as you said, we are trying to get away from the retributive aspect of the criminal justice system and trying to focus now on more of the restorative and the reintegration and the reintegration and the restorative justice aspect of the criminal justice system. And here we're also talking about it. We're giving a second chance to an offender, especially a child offender, an offender who's committed, an adult offender who's committed a petty offense. So it's a means of also giving them a second chance and seeing how we can rehabilitate them so that they become more productive in the society, as opposed to it being retributive and now they just end up in jail, not maybe giving any functionality to society. So that is what diversion is in a nutshell.
In a nutshell. So this is a new concept, like you say.
Yeah, it
so
is.
Before then, it was all going to court.
Yes, it was all going to court. What we had was an informal process. You see, with regards to now having it in a policy document and in a guideline, is that now we are standardizing the process. It was, of course, done informally, but you see, with an informal process, there are no checks and balances. So that was the problem. What were the checks and balances when I'm making a decision as a prosecutor? And I'm saying that this is a case I don't want to go to court. So diversion, the policy and the guidelines give a standard framework for what I am doing in Milimani is what someone else is doing at Kisumu. So that, of course, with regards to complaints and all those, so a standardized system, a standardized framework. Yeah.
Interesting. So who initiates the process, Eddie? How do you get there?
Let's understand it this way: that according to the Constitution, and I'm sure guys have heard this a lot, under Article 157, the office of the DPP is the one mandated to execute criminal prosecutions in this country, of course, with the exception of court martials. But let's not make this class complicated. Let's understand it that it is the DPP that prosecutes individuals who are taken to court.
That's easier.
Such that the net effect of that is, once an investigation is complete, or at a point which the investigators feel it can be forwarded to the ODPP, the prosecutor then examines that file and makes a conscious decision to do one of two things: either to make to charge, the decision to charge, to take this individual suspect or suspects to court, or make a decision not to charge. Now, when a prosecutor makes a decision not to charge, there can be various reasons why they are making that decision. Perhaps the investigations are complete, there are gaps that still need to be filled. But to rope in it, diversion, you could find a situation where the investigations are complete. There is an offense that has been disclosed. There is an offender or offenders that can be attributed to the commission of that offense. But because the prosecutor is looking at answering the question whether a prosecution is the best resolution to that matter, and I use that biblically, that prosecutor can choose not to charge, but to divert. So that, in response to your question, it is a prosecutor, having examined the file, who makes the decision not to charge, as a consequence of which an individual can be taken through diversion. Yes.
Can people be sly about it? I mean, if you decide not to charge me, can I go back and say, you said there was no case, so why am I even going through this process? Is there a loophole to being sly about the whole process?
Of course, as with any other system or process, there exists the possibility of breaks, chinks in the armor, as we say. But what we tried to do in coming up with the policy framework and regulations is, we tried, let me not say tried, we made provision for documentation of the process also, so that it begins with a decision to charge process, which prosecutors listening in and watching appreciate the fact that now we are doing it differently and we are documenting our processes and our decision making.
Yes.
So starting from there, you have documented the decision not to charge. Then when you decide to divert, that discussion, the outcome of the discussion, what is expected to be done by the parties concerned, all is reduced to writing.
Okay.
There is a checklist that every prosecutor will look at as they are making the consideration to divert. And you go along ticking boxes so that at the end of the checklist, you are able to find an answer to the question whether this is a good individual or case to divert. And you document it.
Okay.
That I've followed the process and protocol, I have arrived at this decision, I am signing off as having made the decision to divert this particular case or this particular individual. So it's documented.
Okay.
Yes.
So I know we've explained the DPP is mandating all this, but can the IG or the police decide, recommend that you divert a case? Is it in their place to do so, or is it all on the prosecutors?
Again, to simplify the conversation, anyone can make the recommendation.
Okay.
From the person investigating the case, a relative to the suspect themselves, the chief, a local leader, MCA, MP, anyone can make the proposal. But the decision to divert will be made by the prosecutor.
So an accused can just come and say, well, I'm in trouble, but I seek to divert, to take on diversion.
If at that point he understands or she understands what diversion is, yes. But it's a conversation we can have with them and give them options that are available to them. Perhaps it's important at this point to appreciate the input of the judiciary so far, for the most part, because they've equally been sensitized on diversion and equally plea bargaining to a fair extent. Yeah. A good number of judicial officers now, for matters that end up in court, when the accused person is taking plea or has taken plea, they give the recommendation to them. They tell them that, are you aware that the ODPP is running a diversion program? Are you aware that you can plea bargain with the ODPP? These are options that are open to you. If you wish to pursue them, speak to the prosecutor. So a good number of judicial officers are assisting us to that extent. But for diversion and the assistance coming in from the judiciary, you then will notice that it will come in after the person has been taken to court, which is a slightly different conversation. We'll have this at some point in time. The objective of diversion from the ODPP's perspective is to find a solution without going to court.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. So, Linda, I know you talked about the children's division, which you actually head, I believe.
No.
You will work in the children's division.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Congratulations on
No. So I think the question is, I know diversion benefits children mostly and the youth, but then who else is eligible for diversion?
Okay, here we are talking about adult offenders who've committed petty crimes. We are talking, of course, of child offenders. Here we are told to consider diversion in any case where a child has come into contact with a prosecutor, so you're supposed to consider. However, there is a rider when you're told to consider. We are not saying that in all children cases we will divert. Of course, there are some that we will prosecute. There are some cases where, I think you talked about plea bargaining last week. There are some cases where, even if it's a child, maybe plea bargaining would be the better option, like maybe a murder case involving a child. We're also talking about the vulnerable. These are people who, the aged, the people with mental disability. So these are people who, of course, sometimes commit crimes, but let's say an 87-year-old woman comes to you and probably they've done a petty offense like stealing of chairs. We had some such examples. So we divert such cases. We also have cases involving felonies where, however, where exceptional circumstances exist. Yeah.
Okay, so when you say a felony, this is a class.
Yeah, these are
What is
classes.
a felony?
A felony is a offense where it's more than 3 years, where the punishment is more than 3 years, and a misdemeanor is where the punishment is less than 3 years. So when we're talking about petty cases, these are cases like, let's say, traffic cases are petty, but some of them get very small. We have some child neglect cases where the sentence is very minimal. So these are petty offenses where we are saying for adults. And you find that when you look at the prison population, majority of the people who are in prison are people who are charged with these petty offences. So we are saying, can't we divert these
the
cases so that at least as even ODPP, we are left to deal with now the more complex cases like the corruption cases, the murder cases, the defilement cases, of course, like what we deal with in the children division.
Okay, so I think one of the recent cases of diversion, that I think the closest you came to diversion in recent cases were these guys who were caught partying after curfew hours in Nairobi, and they were sentenced to community. I think they were cleaning up Nairobi River or something. I think that is one of those things that brought diversion very close home. But then the other question is,
yeah, maybe for a disclaimer on what diversion is, and as opposed to a sentence that is rehabilitative. And I think that is one of the confusion that I think
the
misconceptions that we have, the challenges we are having with the uptake of diversion, is that when we're talking about diversion per se, this is where we are taking this case away from the criminal justice system. So these people will not even get to court to plead guilty. So that
these ones were sentenced.
Yes, they were sentenced. To community service.
So they had to go to court.
Yes, So that was one, and community service is probably a rehabilitative sentence, as also like probation and vocational training. Some of these are rehabilitative sentences. But diversion here, we are talking about taking it away. So these people, instead of taking them to court, let's say a child who has stolen, and they come to me for the decision to charge, and when I look at it, I see that the elements and all my decision to charge, I see that the evidence is sufficient and there is public interest has been met to prosecute this child. However, when I'm making this decision, as Eddie said, you now weigh and say, is this a case that really would deserve this child going to court and pleading either guilty or not guilty, or I can divert it and maybe involve a children officer or a probation officer and see which is the best mechanism of dealing with this child away from the system. Because essentially diversion involves taking them away from the criminal justice
but nonetheless
system.
Achieving justice, because that is the other misconception. Justice will not only be served by someone being taken to court and sentenced either to pay a fine or serve jail term. You can achieve justice other ways. It's a broad definition of what justice is. And perhaps, and sorry, I realized I cut Linda short. I'm not sure she was through. Are you through? I am a good student of simplicity. So let's just demystify this and break it down as simply as possible. Let me make a general assumption here that we are all decent, law-abiding citizens, or the people listening or watching us this morning. You pay your taxes on time. You're never late. You're always at your appointment on time. You don't insult people. You're a decent human being, and you live your life as well as the law allows you to do. You're Christian, you're Muslim, you're Hindu. You believe in your religious creed. Yes, you have your values, and therefore there is no expectation upon you, all factors being constant, that you will break the law. But then you leave your house like I did this morning coming here. You get into your vehicle. You're driving to your workplace if you do work. And a police officer does a routine traffic stop. Ask you to perhaps pull on the side, or maybe there's a bit of traffic, so he's walking through vehicles.
What are those ones?
He looks at your insurance sticker
and finds
the insurance sticker is expired.
You're both surprised.
Yes, and you're both surprised.
It
is an offense to drive a motor vehicle in this country without a valid insurance. You decent, law-abiding citizen who doesn't even harm a fly, according to the eyes of the law, at this point, you're potentially a victim or a candidate to be taken through the criminal justice system. Because at that point, the police officer, legally so, rightfully so, can escort you to the police station, do the necessary paperwork that is done there, then take the file to the DPP. The DPP decides to prosecute you, then you're taken to court for driving with an expired license. Are you suddenly such a bad person that we need to look at you as a criminal?
No.
Is taking you to court the best solution to that particular situation?
Not at all.
Doesn't it make a bit more sense to ask you to go and renew your insurance and be on your business? In fact, right now you can do that from the comfort of your phone. You will get an e-sticker. Show it to the police officer right there by the roadside and tell him nimelipia insurance to him. And you go about your business.
Yes.
That is what diversion seeks to achieve.
But has it?
Will baby steps. It's still fairly new.
Still new.
And I think also, Anita,
Yeah.
maybe also in addition to that, for diversion to work, it's not just us saying, okay, we will divert you, then you go as Anita, now you go about your business.
Yeah.
You also there's also the acceptance of responsibility.
Yes.
So you have to, there's an atonement, yes? So there's that acceptance of responsibility, yes, like, yes, I, Anita, I committed this offense,
Yeah.
and I would like maybe to make restitution either to a victim or maybe to do some community service or maybe to do some form of something, an option that you will be given as Anita. But there has to be that acceptance of responsibility. Otherwise, we by the offender, otherwise we would be just telling people go, and people don't even understand what they did, or they think it's a slap on the wrist. So there has to be some form of
Justice must be served.
Yeah, it must be served.
shown.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know you've talked about petty offenders, traffic, talked about children, but then when is diversion actually considered? Because can a domestic abuse case be considered for diversion, for example? Can it?
I'd say depending on the circumstances. We're not saying, depending on the nature of the offense and the circumstances surrounding it. Because let's say if it's a simple assault, like these people assaulted each other and they came to us, and yes, we have the P3 forms and it's a domestic issue. Yes, we can divert. And as we're looking at this, we're looking at which is the best option that we can use. Of course, there are things like grievous harm, where we said maybe let the other complicated processes like plea bargaining work, but maybe for a simple assault, where they can get some form of anger management classes or some form of family group therapy classes, so that, because sometimes some of these cases there are children involved, so they saw mommy and daddy fighting, and mommy maybe
in Kenya?
Yes, they are
Those programs in Kenya.
with
You see
regards
them on TV.
Yes, we have like the children department. They do family group conferences with the children who have offended. So they do family group conferences, and even us, we talk about the diversion meeting, where we have a conference between the offender, the victim, and other stakeholders like the investigating officer, maybe the probation officer, the children officer, where we sit down, now we agree which is the best, and maybe now forward them either to the probation department or the children department to see how they can maybe do some form of supervision, some bit of classes. And we've even had NGOs coming up on board assisting us, especially in Milimani we have one called SEFA. It has really assisted us with people who've been charged with child neglect, the women who've been charged with child neglect, because these are women who actually have children. When you talk about imprisoned mothers with children, majority of them are these people who have been charged with child neglect. How do you assist? And I was actually told yesterday an interesting statistics. For a child, maybe a child who has accompanied a mother in prison, they spend about 410 shillings per day to sustain that child. Because of course that child, there is the formula, the things like the...
It's expensive.
Diaper. It's very expensive. But we have now people like SEFA assisting us with maybe some form of vocational training. We have the NEST assisting us with how they assist with these women who have children, young children, and do not have places to stay. Yeah, and it's we cannot say that we're operating diversion in a silo. Diversion has to be a coordinated. Yes, it is a coordinated, because of course we cannot do it alone.
Okay.
Yeah.
But over and above Linda's response, partly also to directly respond to your question, cases of sexual and gender-based violence, generally as a rule, according to the policy, are ousted from the ambit of diversion, because we look at the
Simplicity.
of
Ousted from the ambit.
are not considered rather
Okay.
for diversion because of the nature of the offense and the effect on the victim. Over and above the general riding principle that we are trying to look at misdemeanors and not necessarily felonies. But SGBV as a category, generally, it's not up for discussion.
Yeah. Okay, so then maybe I'll ask from a mtaa point of view. Can you still be arrested for loitering? You know those cases that used to have, you arrested loitering and just feeling huko jaywalking in the estate. Mnaingizwa ndani ya gari ya polisi, mnaenda, then kidogo gets taken to court and it's a whole story. Your mother can't raise your bail and then you're taken through Nambwa, then he'll be in for 3 months. Are those cases one of those that should go through diversion?
Let me answer that. Let me be smart in the way I answer that question.
Please, dear.
First and foremost, as prosecutors, we are not in control of what the police officers on the meet are doing. We don't know who they are arresting and why they are arresting them.
Yeah.
For the most part, we get to know the reasons for the arrest when they compile a file and bring it to us. Because they are mandated to investigate, we are mandated to prosecute.
Yes.
So technically, what they are doing, huko nje, we don't know. If he brings me a file that I feel is not worth the time, I will make that
the decision.
The decision.
Yeah.
Be that as is, we do a lot of training, even with members of the National Police Service, to bring each other up to speed on emerging jurisprudence, on the types of cases perhaps that we need to reconsider, on how best to investigate and how best to have a close working relationship with them insofar as investigation and prosecution is concerned. So every so often when we have these types of engagements, some of these issues pop up, and you know, they are raised, and perhaps the police will say, we have been doing this for this while, but we bring the file, you guys never approve the charge sheets, and we give them a justification reasons why. I don't know why they would arrest not a police officer, but once they arrest and investigate, hoping they don't take too long to do that, they will forward the files to
you, then you make the decision. Yes. So then, does public interest count in diversion? What if a diversion agreement raises public outcry? What was no, this one should have gone through the process? Have you had such a case?
That's a good question.
Have you had such a case?
Yes.
Okay.
Personally, I know I have. I suspect Linda has as well. In some sections, let me speak about this particular one case in Lamu, for instance, where a juvenile actually was brought to my office early one morning, and a file had been prepared, and the investigation related to him having stolen coconuts, nazi, from a tree. How many are they? 5 or something like that. And a small group had gathered outside the office. So immediately I saw that file. For me, it clicked diversion. 1, because they're less than 18. And 2, I'm looking at what is said to have been stolen from the global picture of restorative justice. So I went through the motions with the parties concerned. And perhaps Linda mentioned this. We do have a diversion conference. And we have all parties concerned attending that diversion conference, including the investigating officer, so that he doesn't say we are making decisions that water down his efforts. So I had that conference, and it was fairly sober. I explained to them why, for me, that is a case that doesn't need to go to court. But nonetheless, this individual needs to atone for his mistakes. And we agreed on practically everything. Prepared the diversion agreement. Everyone who needed to sign, signed. And at that point, I felt, or I thought, that all parties were happy. In the afternoon, a group of guys came to the office. And told me, you do not know this boy. It is not the first time he's stealing coconuts from us. He stole from that farm last week. He has stolen from a different farm 2 weeks before. Basically, there's some track history to his stealing, particularly coconuts from people's farms. And therefore, as a community, they were tired because they farm this crop so that they can earn some income. And when that income is taken away from them, of course, it has repercussions on their own livelihood. So they are not able to meet their own obligations. And it is too prevalent being done by the same person over and over again. So the community, in their eyes, they felt that, no, we need something done to this boy. If you actually, and for some reason, society is interesting. When an individual like that is a problem, they say, Serikali, take care of him.
Yes.
Yet this individual is coming from the same community and society that has contributed. It's a long conversation we can have. That has contributed to him doing the things that he has done.
Bad behavior.
So I was faced with that situation where the community is saying, this is not the first time this boy is doing this, and we need a solution from you, Mr. DPP. If you ask him to pay for the coconuts he has stolen and be on good behavior for the rest of his life, to us that is not enough. So to directly respond to your question, yes, there can be an input from the public. As to what I chose to do with that information, I don't know whether you want me to respond to it or I have time for it. But you see, the concept of diversion is to look to an extent as to why an offender offended. With your permission, I have a slightly better example to sort of give an answer to that. I had this, again, juvenile who was brought to my office, having been accused of stealing a gas cylinder, 13 kg gas cylinder. And both the offense, the investigation, the arrest, and the presentation to my office for consideration to charge happened within 24 hours. So everything was still fairly fresh. So the case was that he had stolen this gas cylinder and then he had attempted to sell it. In fact, he had received payment for it via M-Pesa. So there are three people. The owner of the gas cylinder, the young boy who had stolen the cylinder, and the person who had given money expecting a cylinder. I sat them in my office. The owner of the cylinder was a lady. She was saying, I can see my gas cylinder, Dohi, because it was brought. All I want is for me to be allowed to take my cylinder and go and cook for my children.
That's all she wants.
It had been stolen. Niliamka asubuhi nikapata haiko. But ndio hii. It favors me in no way prosecuting the person who had stolen it. Because mimi sina haja na yeye kwenda kotini. Mi shida yangu ni mtungi. And I know, because she was telling me, I know if we go to court, I will not have access to this cylinder for quite some time. Because it has to be used as an exhibit. So how she was saying, mimi nipe mtungi yangu niende home. The boy admitted that yes, he had stolen the cylinder. And the third party who tried to buy the cylinder had asked the boy, whether he knew anyone who had a 13 kg cylinder, because he wanted to upgrade from a 6 kg. So when the boy stole it, he communicated to him that niko na mtungi, and it's 1,000 shillings. So he wired the money to him. In fact, it was weird because he was saying, had he delivered the cylinder to me, I would have realized by the time I'm picking it, it's not empty, it's on a gas daddy. So I would not have consciously bought a cylinder that has gas inside. And here we are in a situation where there are three people, each one expressing their interest. So what was interesting, and which is the buy-in into your last comment, if not question, is we tried to find out from the boy, why would you steal a gas cylinder? And he says, we do not have money at home. My father is never there. And my mother is struggling to feed us.
So the background counts.
Yes. I am 17 years old. I have analyzed the situation and I realize I don't need to go to school. What I need to do is support my mother in bringing us guys up. I am the firstborn in that family. And therefore, let me help my mother take care of my siblings. Had I sold this cylinder, I would have given the money to my mother so that he helps to feed us. Now, if you're quick to go to trial, this is information you will never get. And therefore, from a diversion perspective, if you decide to divert, which I did in that case, coincidentally, but I put the boy to task. And I told him, one of the things that I expect you to do is to go back to school and to finish your studies. So that, like Linda said earlier, you give that boy a second chance. Don't condemn him to suffer the absence of the father, to suffer the economic challenges that the mother suffers from, so that now he bears that weight on his shoulders. Let him go to school. Coincidentally, he sat with his KCSE last year. He wasn't in the papers as the best performing student, but at least he completed
his high school.
And from that perspective, and as Linda said, we are doing restorative justice. The owner of the gas cylinder went with it. The gentleman who had wired 1,000 shillings got his money back. The boy got an opportunity to go back to school. To be honest, I don't know to what extent he's supporting the family now, but the thinking and the idea then was,
don't take him to the system.
Taking this boy to the criminal justice system will not. In fact, had he gone to court, I can almost guarantee he would have been admitted to bail because he's a juvenile, and the family will not have been able to meet the terms of bond. And therefore will add to a statistic that we are trying to run away from. Of people who are congesting prisons because of things and situations that can be avoided.
Yes. So we are online, like you know. So there's Givaiga Joe who says, hello, how do you plan to roll out diversion in the entire country? Because where I am, diversion is yet to be implemented. Stakeholders are willing to support diversion, but are waiting for the ODPP to lead the program. Thanks. It doesn't say where from. So maybe talks of rollout.
I think the diversion policy and the guidelines were launched in 2019.
Okay.
And we did a very robust going to the ground and trying to speak now to people, and it was a multi-stakeholder. As I said, we cannot operate diversion in a silo.
Yeah.
So it was a multi-stakeholder approach where we trained prosecutors together with judicial officers, the probation, the government stakeholders who in the criminal justice system, so the probation, the children officers, and also tried now getting the NGOs and other civil society actors, because of course some of these programs, the options, like you've had, we have counseling and all that.
Yeah.
Some of them are expensive, let me just say expensive, and are not readily available even within government. So we did that till COVID hit. We've now tried to do the virtual dissemination of the diversion policy, but especially for prosecutors, we're working hand in hand with the PTI to see whether it can be disseminated now to all prosecutors on the ground, and how now it can. You see, when I train a prosecutor, I'm an ambassador of diversion at the Children's Court. And the other people I've trained at the Children's Court are now also ambassadors of diversion. So once they're trained, they can now also disseminate information to the other people on the ground. Actually, the heads of stations, head of counties like Eddie, they were trained on diversion. So also seeing how in their barazas and all those things, when they're invited, how they can speak about diversion, and now how the community, because at the end of the day, these offenders are going back to the community. So if the community does not understand what diversion is, then we have a problem, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay. So Bonnie Okemwa, thanks for the question. He asks, first of all, he commends you. Thank you, team, for the good work you're doing this morning. For clarity purposes to Kenyans, mention the exemptions of offenses that can't go through the diversion process and why. Then reasons for diversions in point form. We are class. And finally, who initiates the process?
Okay, maybe I can start with the first one.
Yeah.
When we talked about who is eligible for diversion, we talked about adult offenders and who've committed misdemeanors. Yeah. We also talked about now the child offenders.
Misdemeanors.
Okay, those petty offenses. Let's say stealing, isn't it? We do a lot of stealing.
Steal
coconuts, these ones who are stealing coconuts and all that.
Or regulatory offenses. Sometimes you find people who are operating bars or businesses without a license.
These traffic offenses, those are some of the very small, let's call them then petty offenses, which do not even attract very high fines. We also have now the children who've committed, we say all offenses. And why we talked about children committing all offenses, we have the issue of the Romeo and Juliet cases. These are actually sexual offenses, isn't it? I know I watched you with Madam Karemi, who's our in charge in the children division, talking about the Romeo and Juliet cases. These are actually sexual offenses, but here are a boyfriend and girlfriend scenario where the age gaps are very small, isn't it? Like 2-3 years, and it's not forceful. We can put it in a consent form, but in quotes, because of course children cannot consent. But in such cases, these are sexual offenses. Initially we had been charging with defilement, and the boy had really been suffering. So even the judicial officers now also, we have Justice Omondi's case where she was asking, then do we charge both? Because if it is consensual and it's both, have both defiled each other. But we said no. I think diversion would work, and maybe some form of sex education and counseling. So that's the rider when we put for all offenses. That was one of the riders, because sexual offenses per se are not really, we cannot divert sexual offenses because of course, you know, the personal nature of a sexual offense. Even in murder offenses, these complex cases like murder, robbery with violence, those ones we prefer maybe plea bargaining, or you just go through the criminal justice system. So very petty offenses. The rider for the children has been on that one, especially for the Romeo and Juliet cases, and also these vulnerable people, the elderly who've committed now also the petty offenses, the simple stealing and all those things.
Okay. I hope you've been answered there. So there's Collins Gonya. Thanks for your comment, Collins. He says, although criminal justice in Kenya has primarily focused on offender punishment, it should not be lost to us that many judicial officers are now embracing offender rehabilitation as opposed to punishment, which is of course commendable. It means the gospel is out there on diversion and just being restorative and not being too punishing. And then there is Michael who asks, and I bet must have been my next question. Last week we talked about plea bargain, and there's sort of a thin line that needs to be clarified. Okay. So what's the difference between plea bargain and diversion?
Okay, maybe if I can start, then I'll also give Eddie to continue. Simply put, because we said we're doing it simply, one is an alternative to prosecution. So diversion, that's what the simple, you don't go through the system. And even if you go through the system, let's say a matter is already in court, has been registered, because of course there are some cases already in court as of right now, but they can also benefit from diversion. So we are going to take them away and withdraw these matters from the system once we've finalized on the diversion. So one is an alternative to prosecution, the other one is an alternative to trial. Because as I think you heard from plea bargaining and the guests who were here last week, plea bargaining is essentially a negotiation between a prosecutor and the accused person. And it's really about either a lesser charge or withdrawal of some of these charges. So they'll have to still go back to court with the plea agreement, and they will have to plead guilty to something. So they'll not go through the full trial where the witnesses are going to be called, they will examine.
Or get the mandatory sentence.
Yes, so something will be negotiated, but it's an alternative to trial, but they will still have to plead guilty in court and they will be sentenced. In diversion, we don't have sentences.
We don't go to court.
We actually we don't have sentences because some cases are already in court, but we will withdraw them. Yes. So the number two, when I talk about the differences, we don't have a criminal record. You see, for plea bargaining, they have to plead guilty to something. So that now there's a criminal record because, of course, they've pleaded guilty to something. But here, because it's just an acceptance of responsibility and atonement, they don't have a record because they are not pleading guilty to anything. They're just accepting responsibility and seeing ways and means of which to atone, either to the victim or to the public or to the community at large. The third one is with regards to the law. We have plea bargaining entrenched in our law. We have Section 137A to O of the CPC. With plea bargaining, Criminal Procedure Code, sorry, of the Criminal Procedure Code. However, with regards to diversion, we are anchoring it on our decision to charge, on our mandate as ODPP, which is a constitutional mandate. Maybe Eddie can add anything?
No. By and large, that's really it. The effect of which is different, of plea bargaining and diversion. The net effect is different. But simply put, with plea bargaining, you will, depending on the sentence, but there's a possibility of jail time. You will be found guilty for something. But with diversion, the objective here is not to have someone bear a criminal record because they will not be entered as having been found guilty of anything.
And we'll talk about that in a bit. So the other question I have is diversion the same as probation? Eddie?
No.
What is probation?
Probation is a sentence.
Oh, it is. So what sort of sentence is it? Because our understanding of all these things is based on things we watch on TV.
Yes.
So what is probation and how different is it from diversion?
Okay, if I was to say what probation is, it is a non-custodial sentence.
Non-custodial means you don't go...
You will not go to prison. There's no prison term, let's say a year. But you can be sentenced to maybe 3 years in probation. And a probation officer is going to supervise the probation and will inform court if maybe the offender or the person now who's been sentenced has run away or is not going through the probation.
And those probation officers are things we see on TV. So if you tell Kenyans now that they're probation
we do
officers
have.
in this country.
We actually have probation officers, and they do have an act. The
wow, for real.
Probation of Offenders Act.
Last week when we were talking about plea bargain, I saw a lot of questions on probation. Then I discovered, they're probation officers. But now when you speak about it like this, then actually there are probation officers in this country.
They actually are holding department. I think either under the Ministry of Social Services.
Yes.
They are a whole department actually within government, and
Yeah,
they're actually decentralized.
Yeah.
So we have probation officers even in the county, up to the county levels, and they really assist the court, especially. And even us, especially, and they're very critical, by the way, in diversion. So first, let me start with what they do in court, especially in terms of sentencing. They do the pre-sentencing reports. They actually go and interview the victims. They interview the community, because as we've said, probation is a non-custodial sentence. So this person is going back to the community after being found guilty of a crime by court. They also have now an expanded role, because now they also do the pre-bail reports before a person is granted bail. So they still go to the ground and check and see whether this person is eligible for bail or not. Now, with regards to diversion, we are now actually seeing the benefits of the probation officers, because as we've said, diversion can be done pre-charge, that is before going to court, when you're making the decision to charge, but it can also be done for cases that are already in court. And in cases where they're already in court, they're really assisting us, especially with the social inquiry reports, because at the end of the day, this person has to go back where? To the community, as Eddie said. This person, of course, there's a victim, and you also want to know the victim's views, the community's views, and all this. So probation have really now stepped up with the social inquiry reports, giving them to us, and they're even giving us recommendations whether this person is eligible for diversion or not. They are really now playing a very big role, and I think with the expanded mandate and also with the interactions with the ODPP and the probation office, now they can do also things like supervision. It has probably not yet gone there, where now they can do the supervision, full supervision for us, but I think that is now where we are headed. The supervision, now looking at our stakeholders and now mapping them out. So I think that's the next step.
So and then again, from a layman's perspective, this probation officer can come back and say, you diverted someone a case, but I have seen that it is not working. It needs to be revisited.
Let's, how do I answer that? If for instance, like the example I had used of the boy that I asked to go back to school. If a probation officer comes and reports after we request them to furnish us without information, before execution of the diversion option, comes and tells Linda, myself, or any prosecutor that in as much as you're suggesting or recommending that this individual goes back to school and completes their study, it will be a challenge to raise school fees.
Yes.
Because they would have gone and interviewed the parent or parents.
And discover the cause.
They would have gone and interviewed the teacher or the head teacher and come back and say, in fact, he has had a problematic schooling so far. He's always in and out of school because of school fees related issues. So the probation officer will come and tell you, you want to exercise the option of requesting the individual to complete his studies, but that by itself might be difficult to execute because as a family they don't always have money to pay the fees.
Can't afford it,
And therefore, like Linda is saying, at that point you appreciate the importance of that probation officer. He or she may not necessarily tell you whether or not your option is the right one to pick, but he will tell you the circumstances that will either support or work against the option that you've chosen. And at that point, then you reconsider how best to approach the issue. There's something critically important that Linda said before she invited me to speak just now, that as a prosecutor, in considering diversion, in engaging with other people out there, both private and public entities, we must do stakeholder mapping.
Important.
We must. So that if the report comes back that school fees is an issue, I should be in a position that I can call agency X that deliberately has set up to assist the payment of school fees of children in Turkana County, for instance. I'll just pick that. So that now you're pulling resources together that will be of benefit to the individual who is the beneficiary of the diversion and support the criminal justice system to attain and achieve restorative justice. So it doesn't necessarily need to end there by you getting a report that school fees would be an issue. The question then you ask yourself as a prosecutor is, who will pay that school fees?
Actually, to even complete the restorative cycle.
Exactly.
Yeah, you just don't throw a case
Yes.
to the bone. Thanks, Alois Kemo. I think we answered that, the misconceptions about diversion, right? I think we did.
Does he have any
He
one
just
in
asked,
particular?
no, nothing. Just clarify misconceptions about diversion.
But you
And-
can still speak to that.
Well, if you can. Yeah.
Biggest misconception is that we as prosecutors are
Out to draw blood.
Cutting
Punish.
deals.
cutting deals.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
We as prosecutors
we are dealing with people's
yes,
lives.
are
Yeah.
cutting deals. We are not. For two key reasons. One, I said we are exercising our mandate as given to us by the Constitution.
Yeah.
And two, we are documenting the entire process. And therefore, if any individual thinks, feels, or suspects that we are cutting deals, they are
can go
free.
back.
Linda has her supervisor. I have my supervisor. If you are aggrieved by the decision that Linda made, go and challenge that with her supervisor. And the decision that Linda made, or decisions that Linda made, will be put on the table. That conversation had, and then you will be told she followed the due process, or Eddie followed the due process, and therefore we are not cutting deals. Second big misconception is people love blood in this country.
Punish.
People love seeing someone go to prison, taken to the cells
It's a human thing.
on a Friday, ndo asitoke mpaka Monday ndo alete kotini. He goes to court.
Yeah.
He's convicted and sentenced. They want to see someone being sentenced.
Yeah.
Because that is their appreciation of what justice is.
Yeah.
The call we are having or putting out there is that is not the only definition of justice. I always say this, and Linda knows. When we are engaging with people in this discourse on diversion, I ask people to stop looking at suspects as files.
Give them names.
They are human beings.
Just not a number.
Yes. It so happens that at that point in time, it's not someone related to you as it were, or even yourself, but it could be you. It could be your son, your daughter, your mother who is 90 years old, who has to go through the system because people want blood. Is that the best you would want for your mother, for yourself, for your son, for your daughter?
Not.
Let's not look at people as files.
Yeah.
And therefore, blood is not the only solution. That a jail term is not the only way to achieve justice. Just by simple appreciation and definition of diversion, we have a lot of road construction happening right now.
So just another
Where the
way
section
to
of the
reach a
road is under
destination.
construction, you are told to take a detour, but you will still get to your destination. That is exactly it.
Wewe ni mwalimu. Wewe ni mwalimu. I hope that is clear. So Carol asks, she has two questions here. First of all, she comments, very informative discussion and very well articulated. So she asks, what message do you have for civil society organizations working in the criminal justice space? How can they partner with you to maximize the benefits of diversion policy? And that asked, are you partnering with any actors in the civil society space? How are you working with them?
I think when it comes to civil society, I think they would be some of our biggest champions for diversion.
Yeah.
And whether we're working with any civil society, us as Milimani, we have been working with some civil society organizations like CEFA, who have been offering diversion programs like the counseling and vocational training for these children. Yeah. And I think, Eddie, I'm sure there are some, maybe you
many, along the entire coastal strip, if not Lamu, we have Muhuri, we have Haki Africa, who not only are partners towards the tail end of diversion, they themselves, many times, propose to us to consider diversion for individuals.
For most of the cases.
Yes.
So civil society has been, I think, our biggest champion. And when we talked about the stakeholder mapping, I think that is probably something that has not happened fully, so that we know, like in Kiambu, which are the stakeholders now we can run to, and in Nairobi probably, which are maybe, because of course Nairobi has the most headquarters, which are these stakeholders we can actually run to with regards to diversion. But I think they play a very big role, especially, I said we cannot, and I keep on saying that, we cannot operate in a silo, because these stakeholders are the ones who provide these services. When you talk about options, because at the end of the day, for diversion to work, there have to be options. These options like counseling. If it's someone who is in drugs, there has to be drug and alcohol rehabilitation. So who can offer that for us? And it's mostly the civil society organizations. So if they can come on board, we are of course open. I think you can approach the ODPP, you can write a letter, express interest, and I think we can maybe consider.
I think that's a very good call to action. If at all there are any out there who want to partner with you on diversion, then they can definitely come on.
Of benefit, because I suspect it will. You invariably will find that there are organizations who execute their mandate within a specific geographical region. Like there's a CSO that only operates in Nakuru County, or a CSO that only operates in Kisumu County. Nothing stops that CSO or our office in that county from engaging with each other at that level. It doesn't necessarily have to be a conversation that you have to forward to the headquarters. Of course, we will report back.
Because again, you're in every county.
For accountability, yes. We will report back on what we are doing on the ground. But no one should feel that because I do not have a national voice, I cannot speak to the ODPP Nairobi headquarters. My operations are in County X. Go to the county head, the ODPP head of county in that particular county. Sit down with them, have a conversation, agree on how you can work together.
Oh, good. So there's a question here on children, and maybe that's for you, Linda. Also, kindly speak about a bit more about the role of Department of Children's Services and children officers. How can they partner more with ODPP on diversion?
Okay. I think the children office has been mandated. They have the mandate of children. I think that is their core mandate. It is children. So when we talk about children's department, I think they come in from the word go. When you're even making these decisions, because as Eddie said, we might not know the circumstances of this child. What we might have in the file is maybe something very bad that this child did. We have an example that happened, I think, a few years back, probably before we really concretized on diversion, where we had a very young child who had committed an arson attack on his sister. And I think also Karimi touched on it a bit last time. And I think the person who really assisted was the children officer. Because at the end of the day, we had the file, yes? We had the file with us. We had, of course, whatever it is, the ingredients had been met. But at the end of the day, this was a family setup. The children also very young. And we really needed to find out which is the best scenario. How are we best going to deal? Because the mother did not want the child. The other child is sick, was in hospital for a very long period of time. And this child was now in a remand center, and they were actually very suicidal. So even when they were going for, we proposed that they go for psychiatric assessment, and they found that this child was getting into some form of depression. And what did they want? This child was always asking for the sister, that they want to see the sister, if they can just see the sister and just say hi.
Offense, but
but they want
to see the sister.
They want to see the sister.
They
are not connecting to. So what was it? The children department was so instrumental for us, because from the children report, we were able to get to know the circumstances. I think, as Karimi had said last time, the father was a very bad father. The stepfather really did not connect with this child, so the child wanted them gone so that he remains with his mother, because the father had passed away. So I think those are the things that the children department, and the children department was able to get for us a placement where this child could go and now stay. And now see how they can do some form of family group therapy, so that the family now can be cohesive again. So the children department is very, very important. Number one, from the get-go, because of reports, they get to know, they help us know the social circumstances of this child. Also, what the community is saying about this child, because as Eddie said, there's a community somewhere who was saying a child who's stolen five coconuts is a repeat offender and a crime against humanity, isn't it? So the children department is important, and where we want them to come in is from the get-go. As we're making this decision to charge and the decision to divert, can we also have the children officer on board? And we've had some very good children officers. I have an example where we had a child neglect case, a mother who had neglected the child because of alcoholism. And the children officer was very instrumental, number one, as this woman was now getting a placement for drug and alcohol rehabilitation. The children officer came on board on where this child is going to go and stay in the interim before they finalize their program. And it was a very successful program. So I think the children officer from the get-go, but also in all stages of diversion, because they also offer supervision. Of course, we are not everywhere, and they're in the sub-county level where they can offer now supervision in the community. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you everyone for watching and for engaging with us. Alois, Caro, Bonnie, Lanoi, JV, thanks for watching. Vincent, John, Monique, Beatrice, thank you so much for watching. Keep engaging with us. Like I say, we are in class together. We are trying to learn exactly what diversion entails. So Eddie, diversion is allowed in exceptional circumstance test in felony cases. Just give us a bit of what this means, first of all. English for me and the rest.
Again, we will say this consistently throughout this interview, Linda and myself, that there are two general broad classifications of offenses, depending on how much time one could possibly serve if they get a custodial sentence. If you are sentenced to 3 years, a maximum of 3 years, so 3 years or less, the law defines that as a misdemeanor. It's a lesser category of offense. If you could be sentenced or you're sentenced to anything above 3 years, then that is a felony. That is a more serious offense. So throughout, when you say misdemeanor and felony, I hope guys can appreciate it that way. But misdemeanor means 3 years or less sentence, custodial sentence. Felony means 3 years or more, custodial sentence. Now, this conversation on diversion, like Linda said when she began this talk today, said that we are applying it in Kenya perhaps now, in this period, but it is neither new, nor is it unique to Kenya. It has been practiced elsewhere. Those countries that did this before us, the general expectation, the general thinking behind diversion is to minimize the interaction of people who potentially face misdemeanor, who have committed misdemeanors rather, from coming to court. Those people who, if found guilty, would possibly be sentenced to a maximum of 3 years. Diversion primarily looks at them and asks, do we have to take these individuals to court? Or can we offer a different solution that still leads to justice? Let everyone remember that we are still in this for justice. However, on a case-by-case basis, each one to be considered alone, there might be instances where an offense is a felony offense, but when you apply as a prosecutor, when you apply yourself to the situation, you hold the belief that diversion can be an option, depending on several things. The offender, the offense, the option for diversion they want to recommend. I'll give a very real and practical and current example that is a conversation we are having.
That would be nice.
We are having conversation with the National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC, in relation to terrorism offenses. Now, NCTC is mandated to, among other things, do or manage and run de-radicalization programs for individuals who had joined the terrorism arena. And therefore, this conversation we're having with them relates to people who, if they were brought to court, for instance, possibly could be charged with membership of a terrorist group. Coincidentally, the offenses for the terrorism-related offenses, the least penalty provided for is 10 years in prison. Most of them speak of 30, so it's not a misdemeanor. But NCTC is telling us, or we are having this conversation and we're saying, there are people who will even admit that they were members of a terrorist group, Al-Shabaab, for instance. But they were not combatants, they were not frontline. They're not the ones who would strap a vest and come and detonate themselves. They're not the ones who will acquire AK-47 assault rifles and shoot people at a mall. They're not the ones who are going out to kill. But they offer auxiliary support.
Taxi driver.
Or it's someone who needs to cook for this person when they're there.
People say KYM, the KYMs.
To say KYM. So this individual gets into contact with law enforcement here. And you analyze that individual, and NCTC and the ODPP are in conversation, and they say this person can be rehabilitated. So rehabilitation becomes a potential or diversion option for this individual. But then Over and above rehabilitation, they are a huge pool of knowledge and information that can be used in the fight against terrorism. And therefore, the conversation here is, though it is a felony, considering what we want to achieve with this individual, can we get the mandate of the DPP? Because if it is not a misdemeanor, the DPP has to give his consent for diversion to be an option for them. Can we speak with the DPP and ask for this individual to be a good candidate for diversion, because they will be rehabilitated, they will offer information that is valuable to the fight, they will be an ally more than anything else. If we choose to take them to court, and we have seen this many times, I prosecute sitting, they will sit and wait for the case against them. They will be very harsh and unfriendly towards the system. They will not give you any information. They will not seek to be rehabilitated and denounce their ways. They will go through their trial. If they are found innocent, they go where it is they want to go. If they are found guilty, they of course are sentenced to some jail time. But the global benefit you've drawn from this individual through court process is minimal compared to what you would have gotten had you diverted, for instance, and made him your ally.
Your ally.
Yes.
Oh, good. So that is the exception.
Yes.
Oh, good. I think that's quite clear. So maybe I'll ask Linda. There's a victim in all this. What is the right of this victim? And can the victim stop the process?
Okay, when we are considering diversion, one of the people that we have to consider their views is the victim and also the investigating officer. So as a prosecutor, it is mandatory to inform the victim about what probably diversion is and what you are willing to consider and what are the options that you would be willing to give the offender. So we do take the victim's views, we hear their views, and sometimes, and someone told me about this approach of, you're telling the victim the benefits of diversion even to this offender. Because at the end of the day, yes, the victim, something has happened to the victim. But of course, I'm sure they would also want some form of rehabilitation for the offender. So you're telling the victim that if this person would go maybe through counseling or something of the sort, they would be better, and maybe the society would be a much better place if this person is reformed. So once we get the views of the victim, there are some victims, of course, who are, and we said that we have had a very, we want blood, isn't it? We want blood, and there are some victims who really just want blood. They want to see this person punished. They want to see this person going through the criminal justice system, irrespective, yes? But what we are saying, especially with diversion, is that, yes, we get the victim's views, but these views are not binding. Because you also, as you're making your decision, you're exercising it independently, and you're also weighing what is in best interest of even the offender. So if this offender can be rehabilitated, as opposed to going through the criminal justice system and using all this money, especially in prison, if they can be rehabilitated, why don't we use this approach? So yes, we get their views. However, if they do not support the process, the views are not binding. And as Eddie said, this is a process that is documented. So we have from the checklist to the agreement, so that even if a victim is maybe aggrieved by my decision, they can have a follow-up with maybe my in charge up to the DPP if they want.
Interesting. So
one more thing to add on to what Linda is saying on the place and role of the victim. You will find, for those who might have occasion to look at the ODPP diversion policy and guidelines, even if you don't, let me just make the comment. One of the things that can possibly be a recommendation by a prosecutor as a diversion option includes compensation. Now, let me be clear on this. We will not tabulate compensation as a court of law would, because one, we are not sitting there as judicial officers, but we are looking at what is capable of discernment, what you can see by a naked eye, if I may use that language. So that if I stole 15,000 shillings from Linda, the prosecutor can make a decision and say, because I had stolen this because I needed to provide for my family, let me go through a diversion option that facilitates me to provide for my family, but also order that the 15,000 shillings I had stolen, I give back to Linda. Now that you can see that maybe it was via M-Pesa or
Yeah.
there was some written agreement somewhere. So you can order that 15,000 shillings to be given back to the victim. So compensation is one of the options where it can be discerned, it can be seen without too much complication that money or something that can be compensated can go back to the victim. Yes.
Okay.
But diversion is meant to be simple. Coincidentally,
Yeah.
diversion is meant to be simple.
Simple.
Hakuna ma complications mingi. Yes.
Okay. So now give us some experience from the coast. There's the legal business of drugs, the youth involved, there's radicalization and all that. How has diversion impacted all this?
Maybe you need to invite me back next week so that I have a session
Yes.
by myself on that.
It's a whole story.
But I'm not asking to be invited.
Yeah.
You're in charge of the program.
Correct.
But the cost is an interesting setup.
Yeah.
For many reasons. There's a general prevalence for drug and substance abuse and the related offenses.
Yeah.
Fairly large parts of the larger coastal strip have suffered or perhaps continue to suffer from historical injustices, as it were, and don't have access to quite a number of things. And therefore it makes it ripe for people to commit offenses from the larger coastal region. Now, the interaction of the prevalence of these issues at the coast, the offenses that are committed versus diversion is an active, ongoing engagement. And we have tried our best as the coastal ODPP leaders from the respective counties to engage with as many actors as possible.
And you mentioned a few.
Including private sector.
Okay.
And perhaps at this point, it's right for me to mention the Red Cross particularly.
Oh, awesome.
Because they have come in quite strongly in setting up rehabilitation centers and minimizing the cost that goes with that.
Yeah.
For people to seek treatment and rehabilitation.
Yeah.
So there's a huge engagement with state and non-state actors, service providers, to support the alternatives that we're speaking about, including diversion. But the cost can be complicated because while you want to take an individual out of the system, you find there is a huge dependency by that individual on the drug of choice that they've been using. You find that the place of that individual in his social setup is such that if you take them away, maybe he's the breadwinner.
Yeah.
If you take them away, even for rehab, for 3 months, the gap that he leaves can be negative to an extent that even now his kids resort to committing crime so that they sustain the family. So it's a conversation that has to be looked at holistically. And as you're providing a solution to an individual, invariably, we've talked about stakeholder mapping, invariably, you can't run away from DCS, Department of Children's Services. You can't run away from other actors who will offer support services to any other dependent of this individual, so that the system does not fail or you don't end up breeding new offenders.
Yeah.
You understand me?
Yes, I get that.
You need to be in a position where you're opening up avenues even for the people that are being left behind. Education, economic empowerment, social integration, so that you don't create a bigger monster than the one you're trying to slay.
Yeah.
That is the general picture about the coast. But perhaps more than anywhere else, and I think there's data to support me on this, we have a huge buy-in from CSOs into what we are trying to achieve with diversion. Like I spoke about two at least, Muhuri and Haki Africa.
Yeah.
They will bring individuals. You will have conversations with them. They will even bring you the setup that this individual is coming from at home. They will tell you, even if you ask this individual to go through a rehab programs, by the way, coincidentally, are not free. Unless ni zile za serikali. The others are not free.
And they're expensive.
To a fair extent.
Yeah.
So who is going to pay for that?
Yeah.
I was looking at some data from the UK yesterday as I was preparing for this talk this morning.
Yeah.
And at some point they posed the question, does diversion for them lead to an improvement of the standing of that individual to the extent that it lessens reoffending?
Yeah, and I have a question on that actually.
And the data on that is inconclusive.
Okay.
Because they are accepting, yes, that we are changing the lifestyles and opportunities of these individuals. But it is not very clear yet, this is as at 2020, whether that has directly led to a reduction in offending by the individual. Or if they are offending, is it still tied to the option given to them by the prosecutor? Is it still tied to diversion as an option for them? Or are these independent occurrences? But for the coast, like I said, collectively, we suffer from more or less the same issues. And to the extent that they are, we also have a lot of defilement and offenses of sexual and gender-based violence types of offenses. Although we had said earlier those ones are ousted or are not under what can be diverted. But admittedly, we are getting some good support from the people on the ground, actors we are working with.
So actually I had a question on that. Diversion is meant to reduce the risk. But then what about reoffending occurs, you know? And then have you seen reoffenders? Like you divert a case and kesho kipiga kona, he's done something else. And still on that, how many times can I be diverted? How many times? Until I figure 18, how many times can I be diverted? Can you say that actually? Diverted. Can I be diverted? Is it the correct?
It's okay.
Is that correct
It's a term of art, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think the first question with regards to reoffending, I think in as much as maybe the studies have found it to be maybe inconclusive with regards to reoffending, as Eddie has said, but I think we should also look at the what do we want to achieve from
what is the end
diversion?
state?
What is the end state? And this is one of the end states that we're saying. This is one of the achievements that we want. That we want the rate of reoffending. And when we talk about children, and I'll talk about children, and when we talk about reoffending, I'll give an example. A 16-year-old is brought to me. This is a child who's 16, isn't it?
Yeah.
I take them through the criminal justice system. When they go to, let's say, the remand home, isn't it? Who are they going to? Let's say it's a petty offense, like the stealing case for Eddie. He stole the coconuts, isn't it? Who are they going to find in the remand homes? Of course, children commit diverse crimes. It's not just stealing, isn't it? The children who commit, maybe let's say the murder. There's some who do robbery with violence. Some very heinous, even terrorism. There are children who are.
So we're seeing
an uptake of radicalization, especially in children. So what do we do? Are we not saying that we just let these people just go because maybe a study is inconclusive or something about reoffending? No. We are saying that let's take them through the diversion. Let us take them away from this system. Because at the end of the day, and what studies have also shown, is that a child has not yet fully developed, isn't it? Even if they're 16, they've not yet fully developed. They still, the molding aspect is still very prime, isn't it? So if you were to rehabilitate this child, take them away from also that very negative maybe effect of maybe going into prison and into the remand homes, and now take them through rehabilitation. If this child has a lifespan of, let's say, 70 years, you have about 50 years of a person who's constructive in the society, as opposed to taking them through the system. They go and learn, and you see some of this for children, it is usually a crime of lack, isn't it? They lack some money for food, so they eat. So once you
make it up.
violence, that becomes a way of life. At the end of the day, that child will not even get to 25, isn't it? But if you were to rehabilitate, take them out of the system, get the 50 years of constructive lifetime of this child, isn't that a better return on investment?
It is. Yeah. And you just reminded me, growing up, there was this thing of juvenile, ule ametoka juvie. So you're even warned, don't even be seen near that person. So I bet part of what diversion does is just eliminate that tag
Yes.
from a child.
Yeah, the
Totally.
discrimination,
Yeah.
of course, that comes with having maybe been in the system. It really weighs a lot on a
Yeah.
child.
And also imagine the coconut thief
Yeah.
going in to meet a radicalized boy.
Yeah.
And they discover there's another option.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. So clearly they're all
And
games.
when we're talking about especially children, the first thing that we're told, and it's even in the Constitution, it's even in the UN Convention, it is the best interest
of the child.
Yeah.
That is of paramount importance. As I'm making a decision in Milimani, as Ed is making his decisions in Lamu, best interest, that's what we are told that we have to ensure that we take into consideration. Yeah.
Okay, so we are on YouTube as well.
Just a
and-
minute before
yes.
we see what YouTube is
Yeah.
saying. There's a question you asked that still begs response.
Oh, okay, sorry.
How many times can we...
Can I be diverted?
Yes. Look, diversion is meant to achieve a specific objective.
Yeah.
That the individual who is a beneficiary of diversion changes his ways and becomes a good law-abiding citizen and is able to contribute to, slightly positive conversations in the society. And therefore, even we as prosecutors need to re-evaluate whether or not we are succeeding in that quest at some point.
Yeah.
If the individual keeps committing the same offense over and over again, especially knowing that the first time out they were a beneficiary of the diversion, the temptation is very high on them.
Yeah.
Because they suspect that I will still go back into the system and the system will respond to me this way. So at some point you have to make a
They
judgment
become
call.
experts.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to make a judgment call
Yeah.
and ask yourself, this is not working.
Yeah.
This individual, be they a child or an elderly person, because they are a cluster of those who are beneficiary of the diversion, or a person who bears a special interest, if they are not responding in a manner that we had anticipated they would, then the option we are giving them is clearly not working.
Yeah.
And therefore we choose a different path.
Yeah, okay.
I will not say, you'll be diverted twice or thrice.
Yeah.
I can't put a
You
number
can't
to
put a
it.
number to it.
But at some point, you have to evaluate whether or not you're succeeding in what you're doing.
Okay, so I'm just recognizing our viewers on YouTube. Thank you very much for watching. Charles asks, is it justified to use it as a fallback when prosecution hits a turbulent stretch?
I was waiting for a question like that because I suspect that is one of the things people think about.
Yeah.
And as I answer that, let me put this across. Diversion rests essentially on 4 pillars.
Yeah.
Maybe 5, but 4. 1, there is an offense. The investigations have been done. There is an offense. There is a person who can be attributed to the commission of that offense, an offender. You can link the offense with the offender.
Yeah.
Number 3, as a prosecutor, you have asked whether taking this person to court is the best option, and you have concluded that it is not. But you will still walk away with justice. Critically, number 4, and that is what distinguishes what we are doing from what perhaps anyone else is either doing or thinking of doing.
Yeah.
The way diversion works under the ODPP is, if diversion fails, we go to rehab, you don't come out right. We ask you to go to school, you refuse to go to school, or you go for first time, third time, you drop out again. For whatever reason, if diversion fails, we go back to court and charge you because we had a complete file that was ready for you to face charges.
Oh, okay. So that
So
brings
it
us to the criminal record bit again.
Yes.
I think also one of the interesting conversations that, on analogies that one of my seniors has ever given us, is that, let's say you're in an alley, me and you, Anita, and I have a gun that is not loaded. Or me and Eddie here, because he's bigger than me. I go to in an alley with him, and I have a gun that is not loaded, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I tell him, give me all your money, isn't it? And as I'm telling him, give me all your money, he decides, no, let me take my chances with this lady who has a gun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can you imagine I don't have a loaded gun and I'm aiming at him? Do you think I will survive the assault?
No.
That is one of the analogies, that if we do not have sufficient evidence, of course it cannot sustain even going to court, isn't it? So when we're talking about diversion, it has to be a crime has been committed, as Eddie has said, and there is sufficiency of evidence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
We do not use it as an escape route.
Yeah.
that
Okay.
because we do not have this particular evidence, let us walk down the path
The
of
diversion route.
No. It is not an escape route. It is not an option to run away from that which we lack. No.
Okay, so Jacinta, thank you for your comments, and she also commends you for doing a superb job. So kindly talk about situations where the offense may appear to be a misdemeanor, but circumstances where we may not apply diversion and public interest. I think we've touched a bit on this.
I think we have.
Yeah?
I think we have.
Okay, those are the YouTube guys. But anyway, I still have a question myself. Diversion is meant to be a big win for the justice system. I mean, I was reading that our prisons currently have the capacity of holding 26,000, but as of 2019, we had 55,000. And then on top of that, the cost of housing a guest of the state is about, I think, 200 and something, 270, meaning at the end of the year, the state has spent 5.5 B. And then you added to the fact that when now there's a mother and a child in jail, then there's 400 has to be spent daily on these people. So again, maybe just an overview. How are you working with Kenya Prisons on this? Are you working? Just tell us a bit about how the system gains from diversion.
Maybe Linda will respond to that. But before we do,
Yeah.
slight correction.
Yes.
We are spending 200 and is it 10 or 70?
70 per day.
And that's by the time we're coming up with the
Yeah.
diversion policy, which is like what, 3
yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
It's 270 shillings a day on food alone. On remandees, not convicts.
Yeah.
Remandees.
All right.
These are people who are waiting for their cases to be determined,
Yeah.
for the court to tell them whether or not they're guilty.
Yeah.
These are the people you're talking about who stole some coconuts, a mango, a bed sheet. I remember reading something in the newspaper. Someone was taken to court because they had stolen underwear less worth 100 shillings.
Are those guys who rob supermarkets?
Yes.
Yeah.
These are the people who are populating the remand home facilities.
Yeah.
270 shillings a day on them. We are not
Tax
even
money.
on food alone.
Yeah.
We've not talked about their healthcare, where they're sleeping, and every incidental thing
Yeah.
to that. And we've not talked about convicts.
Wow. Okay.
Those are remandees.
Yeah.
Wacha watafakari hao. Linda, say what you want.
When we're talking about big wins, of course, we have to start with the offender.
Yeah.
Because for him, it is also a big win because of the criminal record, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, he will not get a criminal record from diversion, and he might get these rehabilitative programs, especially if they're in drugs and all that. They might get and benefit from these options. Now, the second person who wins is the victim. Eddie talked about compensation, isn't it? We can get, and it's about a restorative justice, isn't it? So the victim is also one of the biggest beneficiaries. And also, in as much as we talk about compensation and all that, you see, there are also relationships that you're mending also with diversion, because it's not really about the money aspect. There are also the relationships, either between the offender and the public and the offender and the victim. We also talk about the prosecutor. Of course, with our prosecutorial resources, we're also asking ourselves how better are we using our resources.
Time and resources.
And that's what when we were talking about the retooling aspects, which tools are we using now to assist us in better use of our prosecutorial resources, so that once we divert these cases, we can now concentrate on the ones that are more deserving of our time. We're also talking about the judiciary, of course, with the cost list. If you've ever gone and seen a cost list, especially from some of our courts, like almost 50 cases, isn't it? So are we also getting the caseloads out of court? And also for the prison services, these amounts are, of course, astronomical. The 5.5 billion, even if we reduce it by half, we might have maybe more resources for the prisons, or more resources for the ODPP, or more resources even for the judiciary, isn't it? Yeah, and also to the greater public. When we talk about restorative justice, it's about engagement, it's about accountability, and it's about now cohesion within the public. So the public interest, confidence, you know, that even the system by the public, they get to understand what diversion is, and they also get to get the benefits of diversion. A rehabilitated person, a full sense of reintegration back into the community. And I think it is a wholesome. It's a wholesome.
There's a whole benefit to it. Maybe just finally, as you're winding up, diversion doesn't appear in a criminal record, does it?
No.
So meaning I could just go get my certificate of good conduct and not have it
Yes.
in the system.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a good thing.
Yes.
Can it also be a bad thing? That I can go into the system, high do got diverted, I've turned 19. Kumbe, the things I've been doing, now they're catching up. I never got rehabilitated. Now I go into the bigger. Do you have the discretion of going back and discovering this guy is now for robbery with violence, he's 19. Kumbe alianza hii mchezo at 16.
Work by the time we had agreed it ought to. Like I said, we go back to court.
Yeah.
So that if we said you're going to go through rehab for 6 months, after 6 months, we ask for a report back. If it's positive in your favor, we say, well and good, you mended your ways, live a nice life.
Yeah.
If it is not positive in your favor, we can consider extending it, or we consider which other option we have. Now, if you did everything right, you went through rehab, you went to school, you finished your studies, at the point that we get the report back, we have nothing against you, so to speak, if I may use those words.
Yeah.
We have nothing against you, and therefore you can be a beneficiary of being restorative justice to the society from where you came. If after 2 years, you walk a wrong path and you commit a different offense, what we had agreed with you 2 years before and the rehabilitation you had gone through will remain where it was because it was a success. Even applying principles of natural justice, it would be unfair to invite that process into this conversation.
Okay.
Okay? So if you are a beneficiary of diversion and you went through it successfully, that is a plus for everyone concerned. Linda had just said the parties, for example. If there is an incidence of that person reoffending again in future, and it's actually written in the diversion agreement that all parties concerned, it ends there with that offense, with that conversation, with that agreement. If you're successful, you navigate it well, it's a plus for you. If you choose to reoffend in future, we will consider it as a distinct offense at that time. But let me say this, because it's important. And I'll leave it as food for thought. I won't necessarily give an answer to that. It's a hot topic. Every so often in this country, we hear incidences and cases of arson in schools with a lot of destruction of property.
Yes.
I wouldn't say it's a small offense. It's actually a big deal. And I'm sure everyone would want a solution to it. We've had psychologists and we've seen them on TV trying to explain why kids are banning schools and all that. Maybe it's not necessarily a legal problem. That's a different conversation. But you see actors in the criminal justice system, a good number of them, come out and say, we need action taken against these children. I know for a fact there's a time that the National Police Service had put out a banner and said, if you burn down the school, if you find out that you're the one who did it, we will take your case to court, we will prosecute you, you will have a criminal record, and you will never get a certificate of good conduct.
Yeah.
Now you're telling this to a 16-year-old who has the rest of their lives to live. If they do not have a certificate of good conduct, when will they ever get employed?
Yeah. They totally lose it. Time.
So that, what future are you envisioning for this child once he leaves prison at 24, at 25? He will never get a certificate of good conduct.
Yeah.
Even if informally, I can't give him employment to come and slash grass compound yangu. Because I'll say, hi, you're not a good person, I don't even want you around.
Yeah.
How are we achieving the objective of restoring these individuals to the community? By telling them from the get-go that ban a school, we will take you to court, you will be convicted, we will not give you a certificate of good conduct. And they will need a job from you when they're 25 and they're out looking for that job. That's the type of conversation we need to have.
Yeah.
And I said earlier, let's not look at people as files. Let's not look at people as statistics. Let us look at people as human beings, because you and I are human beings.
And that's powerful.
They might be a victim of a different set of circumstances, but that is what got them there.
Yeah.
They're still human beings. After they've served their time, they will come to live with us. They'll be the one who will come to date your daughter.
Your daughter.
and ask for her hand in marriage, will you accept it?
Eddie. So, parting shots, Linda, we have come to the end of our educative, our classroom, literally. And you've been great teachers. I've seen a lot of comments saying thank you for being very clear in your conversation. So, parting shots, how would success look like for the diversion program?
I think, first of all, thank you very much. It was also a very engaging discussion.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed myself. What would success look like? If we can all join together and see diversion working. Right now, it is at the initial stages, of course, and more needs to be done. More options needs to come out, because at the end of the day, a decision alone, me making that decision to divert alone, will not assist an offender. It is a wholesome approach where the children officers come on board, where the probation, the civil society come on board. Yeah, so I think what I'd like to see is now a consistent diversion approach now for diversion, so that all of us now we stand together and say this is what we want for these actors, these offenders, all the actors coming and saying this is what we want for these offenders. So I think at the end of the day, if we can have that, we can have programs, because really we are really struggling, especially with programs. If we can have good programs, if we can have more people coming on board, more people embracing diversion, so that we are not also limited to our mandates, because sometimes people are so rigid with mandates, like I cannot do this because it is not part of my mandate, or it is not part of this. You cannot tell me to do this because it's not part of my mandate. If we can all come together and work together, I think diversion will really work. It will really assist, especially the children. Yeah.
Eddie, you asked me a very difficult question, no answer. But parting shot, what would success look like for you?
Success
especially for the people you're dealing with in say at the coast.
But I'll give a general comment.
Yeah.
Success for me is two possibilities. The first one is buy-in. Buy-in. Everyone needs to understand what you're trying to achieve here.
Yeah.
Everyone hopefully needs to ride the same horse that is taking us towards restorative justice. Everyone needs to appreciate that we do not ultimately always have to end up in court. And everyone needs to appreciate their role and place in that particular journey.
Yeah.
So buy in. We can't do this alone. Linda has said it 16 times so far.
Yeah.
We can't do this alone. We don't want to do this alone. And therefore, listen to the message you're trying to put across. Please accept it. See some sense in it. And let's work towards attaining the same objective. Second end state for me. Let us...
Kenyan. Finally.
I think too.
Yeah.
Let us reduce the cases and people, or let us take away the people and cases who don't have to go to court from going to court. Let us not clog the system. It is not helping anyone. Especially now in this COVID era, it is not. Now it's a whole mess. Because you arrest someone, the OCS does not want them there. Because they don't know what they're bringing to the station, and they don't want anyone infected from that station. But it's a conversation we need to have. So the OCS quickly sends them off for testing and isolation. We've not even started their case. Once they're done with that, they come to court, they take plea, they're supposed to go for to remand if they haven't met the terms. It's a different conversation over there as well, because they equally do not want them. Let us not clog the system. Let us leave our resources, our manpower, our finances, and everything we are bringing to the table committed towards what we can do better with those resources. Let us not take 87-year-old women, grandmothers, who are found in possession of stolen chairs to court because they were in possession. Yet it is their grandson who stole the seats. Have a conversation with the system and ask yourself, is it really the best use of your resources to prosecute that lady? Is it the best use of your resources to prosecute someone who had stolen underwear for 100 shillings?
Doesn't make sense.
I rest.
Oh, good. Thank you very much, everyone, and especially for engaging with us on social media. Our guests have been the best teachers ever. I've seen your comments, and I bet you have learned something from it. I have learned something from it. Definitely, diversion is not just for the ODPP to execute. It's a whole system and a whole ecosystem. You and I are all involved. It could be, like Eddie said earlier, it could be your brother, your cousin, your neighbor. You need to be able to understand these things and how they apply to you. And of course, always, like for children, it's the best interest of the children. And for adults, we don't have to take everyone to court. We don't have to clog the system and take them through an expensive affair, of running the prison systems. You've had so for yourself. So let's be responsible. Let's learn. Let's educate ourselves. Of course, feel free to still ask questions on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. There are people who are available, of course, to respond to you. So we've come to the end of this broadcast today. Let's continue engaging. We acknowledge all of you who engaged with us today. Thank you for your input and participation. And of course, to the production team for making this possible. We look forward again to ODPP Café next week on Friday. Let's meet again, same place, same time, 8 a.m., not p.m. Have yourself a good weekend and a blessed week ahead. Of course, we'll introduce a new topic again on Monday. Just have a look at our pages and see what we'll be discussing next week. Thank you very much and God bless.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.